The figure of Abraham is one who continues to be given to us as an image of a faithful man. A man faithful in his willingness to take risks in response to the invitation of God. He's given to us on the second Sunday of Lent, and I think this weird time we're in, where we're inclined to cower in fear, Abraham is an image of courage that we can embrace and beg for the grace to follow. Abraham was 75 years old, older even than Father Joe, when he was asked to leave his comfort zone and go to a land of promise, prompted by God. In order to receive what God had in store for him, he had to let everything that he was used to go. In your homes, in your lives, in the context of this Corona time, as Father Jay likes to refer to it as, or is it Father Jabraham? We are being asked to leave everything that we're used to, and ironically, do that at home for the most part. So we're in a certain sense leaving our comfort zone by staying in place, which is frustrating. But the Lord is there in the discomfort. Will you see him? The second great moment of Abraham's faith in the Lord was this promise made to him. He was told to look up into the sky and count the stars, and told that his descendants would exceed that number. But in that scripture, we learn it was only later that dusk came. So in a certain sense, he looked up at the sky of Pittsburgh and counted nothing. He saw nothing. But he knew the stars were there. And he trusted that a man married to a woman far beyond the normal course of having children would be granted descendants. And I think in our own lives, we want to beg for the grace to trust that following the Lord, especially in this time of discomfort, will bear fruit. We may not see it. We want to see results yesterday, if not last week. But the Lord is inviting us to radically trusting him, that in these days, if we are faithful to him, he will glorify that fidelity in ways beyond our imagining. And then the third moment of extraordinary faith that Abraham manifested was, of course, his willingness to sacrifice Isaac. And we know God stayed his hand and he didn't do that. But he was willing to sacrifice the only clear evidence that God's promise would be fulfilled, because God asked him to. So on a deeper level, the thing that can be most frustrating is when we think we've got it all figured out, when we're following the Lord, when we're praying every day, when we've got our holy hour going, when we're etc., etc. We're asked to let even that go. It can be devastating. I'm sure it was devastating for Abraham. We may not feel full of faith, but the proof is in the action. So we want to beg for the grace to act in faith in these days. we hear in the gospel that Abraham rejoiced to see the day of Jesus. And so by analogy, we could say that Abraham rejoiced to see April 2nd, 2020, when his descendants, now extraordinarily numerous as a percentage of the global population, numbering in the billions, would follow the fulfillment of his covenant in Jesus. A covenant with a greater promise than even the one Abraham received, because we hear about it in today's gospel. Do we believe it? It prompted the Jews to take up stones to murder Jesus with. It was so infuriating because it pulled them out of their comfort zone. It forced them to consider sacrificing all they held dear, and they were willing to do violence to prevent it. He said, if you remain in my word, you will truly be my disciples. He didn't say that today, he said that yesterday. He said, whoever keeps my word will never see death. Will never see death. The promise of Jesus conquers death. Jesus conquered death. We're going to be entering into Holy Week starting Sunday. It's going to be the weirdest, most alienating Holy Week, perhaps in the history of the church, but certainly in anyone's living memory. And we're going to be asked to really connect to the death of Jesus, through which the promised resurrection occurs, and live in that in a more profound way than we've been. Because everything that we were used to has been upended. His grace is here for us to embrace. His face is here for us to see. In the circumstances, not that we desire them to be, but in the circumstances as they are. I want this for me. I'm frustrated by these days. I feel disoriented by them. And want them to be different. But the Lord is saying, look in your life. Look in this spring emerging. Look in the relationships that you have. Look at your family. Look at the passion of this priest team to bring the gospel to the world, to bring the light of Christ to the world under the restrictions that we're faced with. See in that my love. Experiencing that my salvation. Accept that. The Mass, whether we're able to be present at it physically or not, enables that transforming power to enter this world. Let's beg for the grace to receive that power today.